Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2229. The topic is training, and the title is Client Program Review, Powerlifting, Again. So last training podcast, I did a review of a powerlifter program, and one of my other powerlifting clients said that was amazing. I would love to hear such a breakdown for my programming. So here we go. So the fun will be is a little bit of contrasting last podcast program versus this one. So the previous program was for a male, and we were structuring his programming around his work schedule, and that required that we have like squat and deadlifts both together on one day. We were we were then choosing, okay, which days do we do which things on, because some days he works from home, some days he goes to the office. So his program was going to be based off of his schedule. It's also then based off of his preference for how he likes to train. And then also exercise selection based on his individual weaknesses. And then where is he at in his progression? So he's trying to build muscle tissue. He's gotten lean enough that he's in his weight class consistently now. So we're not trying to take off a bunch of like body fat, which we did do at first. We were doing body fat loss while trying to build strength. Now we're doing like more so body composition improvement, so he can actually eat more. We don't have to do as much caloric cycling and all that craziness. So his training is structured specifically to all of that, all of his individual needs, and then how he progresses in each lift differently. So what are his weaknesses in each lift? How much volume does he need for each lift? All those things. So this client is a female. She is a 4-time Elite Total Powerlifter. She has Elite Total in 4 different weight classes. Just absolutely insane. She's also an IFBB pro. She's competed in CrossFit. You name it, she's done it. So very fit. She's also a mother of 6, by the way. And we're still kicking ass and getting stronger. And she's just a badass all-around athlete. If you want to learn more about her, her name is Lauren Rutan. So you can look her up on Instagram at Rutan422. And her husband owned Rutan Athletic Club up in Ohio. So you can check that out on their website. She does a lot of programming for a lot of athletes, a lot of powerlifting athletes. I think she had over 20-some athletes in one recent competition. So if you want some powerlifting programming, you can also check her out as well for that. So tons and tons and tons of good stuff. Now, she is an amazing athlete. Now, what we're working to do together is we want to maximize her strength while maximizing the amount of muscle she needs to be strong, but then don't really need to be any bigger than that. And we don't want unnecessary body fat. But we want a body fat percentage level that allows her for optimal strength. What this means is she has been down as low as 123. We've competed as high as like the 148-pound weight class. So as I said, she has 4 elite totals in 4 different weight classes. We've been a little bit all over the place. Now all of that was strategic and on purpose. What we found is 123, she was strong as shit, but she wasn't very resilient. There was a lot of aches and pains and nicks and bumps and bruises along the way. So then, okay, the next one up I think is 132. She was doing well there, but in our off season, we would get up in body weight over 132, up around 138, 140, and she would be significantly stronger. And we're like, ooh, okay. So 123, you're strong as hell, but not well protected, low energy, kind of crappy life. 132, definitely stronger, much more resilient, but maybe not as strong as we could be. So what we found was in powerlifting, your DOTS, which is a calculation score for how strong you are compared to your body weight. That is kind of the biggest measurement of success in powerlifting. So people do compete in weight classes. However, if you have a bigger DOTS score, you're kind of more of a badass. What we found for her is that her DOTS score is going to be best when she's around 140 to 145. So we've played around with her body weight quite a bit. And we found that that's kind of currently our sweet spot for strength. And what we're wanting to do then is, okay, if we're going to stay around this weight, what's the most amount of muscle we can get and use? What's the least amount of fat we can have and not feel low in energy? Now, what way of nutrition and what way of training allows us to do that? This is going to be why her program is structured the way it is. The other factors are that she is strong as hell in squat. She has very strong quads. Our deadlift is a little bit weaker due to anatomy. Her positioning for conventional deadlifts isn't great, but it also relates to her hamstrings, adductors, and glutes needing to be stronger, along with her core. After 6 pregnancies, her core is definitely going to be weak. But that seems to be our biggest hindrance right now to building a bigger DOTS. Is her squat's great, it's continuing to improve. Her bench is over 200 pounds, fine there. So our deadlift is what we want to work on. The last time we were playing with our deadlift position-wise, we had gotten into a narrow sumo position. That got her shins more vertical in the mid-range of the deadlift, and it allowed her to lock out sooner and shorten her range of motion. The downside was, though, we were doing that when we were at the lighter weight classes, and we ended up tweaking a hamstring adductor connector, and that was a bummer because it took us some time to heal that. Now that we're getting more resiliency back, we're fixing those issues, and she's at a higher body fat percentage, a higher muscle mass, higher just reserves, we're going to be slowly moving back to that. We ran into having an upcoming competition sooner than we'd want to make that technique change, though. So we're going to be competing in this next competition conventional. And then after that, we're probably going to switch back to that narrow sumo. The conventional, the downside with her conventional is she has to get the bar higher up off the floor before her shins are vertical, which means then she can start to bring her glutes forward for the lockout. So she has to create a leg drive that is higher than if she were in a wider stance, which would be the narrow sumo. The challenge to that is she's going to need more core strength, more glute strength, more upper hamstring strength to support that higher leg drive and that middle range of motion position that she would be in when the bar's not quite at her knees, the shins aren't quite vertical, but they're almost there. So our program for squats is just, hey, keep the quads strong, let's keep that going. For bench press, we bounce back and forth between pushing her triceps while maintaining her chest, and then the next kind of little section will push her chest and balance her triceps. So sometimes we'll do that 4 weeks on and off, or we might do 8 and 8, 16 and 16, 12, 12. Kind of depends on the flow of life and the time we have between meets. And then for deadlift, it's just glutes and hamstrings and core and glutes and hamstrings and core and glutes and hamstrings and core. It's just all of it all the time. So some of the challenge then with creating her structure is, how do I give enough posterior chain, so core, low back, glutes, hamstrings, how do I give enough training capacity to progress our squat, but really dive into those muscles to push our deadlift? If I just go full force, everything I need out of those muscles for deadlift, we won't be able to progress the squat will regress. So I need to save enough in the posterior chain that we can do heavy and aggressive and good volume for squats, but lean more towards the deadlift work percentage-wise. So maybe it needs to be 70-30, something like that. So that's essentially what I'm looking to do in her programming is, what's enough that we can progress the squat, but give the squat less than what we're giving the deadlift. That's the big balance we have. Now, for her programming, she has squat-based workout on Monday. Then we have a bench workout on Tuesday. She takes Wednesday off. Then Thursday is lower body deadlift, lower body stuff and deadlift. And then Friday is bench accessories. So she's training 4 days a week. Now, what's important to note and what I factor into her programming is, she's also a personal trainer. She's running around after 6 kids. She has her own business. She has a lot going on. That means her nervous system, her central nervous system, and her stress capacity is to some degree used by those factors. So I have to be more controlled and careful in how I use her nervous system and stress tolerance in our training. So I can't have training where it's 7 days a week, 2 hours a day. I might have somebody who's CrossFit Games athlete, professional athlete, Olympics athlete, and we might be doing 2-a-days. So maybe Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, they train twice a day. Wednesday and Saturday is restoration sessions, which can still take like up to 90 minutes, almost 2 hours. So they might train, you're looking at 6 days a week, but there's actually 4 days where they have 2 things. So they have like 10 workout sessions a week. But that's their whole life. That's all they do. That not necessarily probably no kids, probably no actual job. This is their job. So that's training volume and intensity and stress load might be appropriate in those cases. But it is not appropriate and would not be beneficial for someone if they have a spouse, they have kids, they have another job, they have all these other things, especially if that job is active on their feet. So often what I find is athletes who are not being paid to be the athlete, they're not a professional athlete, this isn't the only gig they got going on, they often try to do too much. This is super insanely common among my CrossFit instructor clients. CrossFit instructors, good God, y'all do way too much and don't eat anywhere near enough. So all of them, I have to try to get them to train less often and eat way more. And then all of a sudden they get leaner and stronger, and their performance improves, and they have all these less chronic injuries. They're not trying to floss their shoulder and elbow and knee and use a Theragun on everything under the sun. So too often people tend to do too much. Now, these are all type A personalities, and they're not going to listen to me anyhow, but that's what they do. So for this client, for Lauren, training 4 days a week and the volume that we have is plenty to make progress, but also not put her in such an insane deficit that we're running into chronic injuries and she's tired and fatigued and feeling like crap all the time. So let's go through our Monday workout, which is lower body mobility and squats. Our first circuit is a circuit of 5 movements. Now, for all of my clients, they have exercise tutorials for every single exercise, video tutorials. And then this is all written down so they don't have to remember it, auditory-wise like you're going to have to. They can see it on paper, and they can click a link and watch somebody do the exercise and teach them how to do it. So if you're a client of mine, you get all that, so you don't have to remember all this stuff. But we have a pigeon pose stretch, which is to open up the glute muscles. And then we have an adductor stretch in actually 2 different variations. And then we have a kind of a hinging movement that is going to force core bracing and force a hinge pattern without the lumbar spine rounding. So I'm going to go through the names. They're going to be long and tedious, but I want to just throw it out there. And then also, if you like the idea of this program and you want just a free copy of this, shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. I'll just send you this program. Don't do it. It's not your program, but you can see everything I'm talking about on paper. Okay, so we have a dynamic pigeon pose, which is called a rocking pigeon. That's the one where she does a little bit of a dynamic movement to open up the glutes and groin. Then we have a quadruped adductor stretch, and this is a straight leg broken frog variation. And then we also have a broken frog stretch with a leg lift, which is going to force a glute contraction. So those two will open up the adductors and hamstrings, but then also force her to do a muscular contraction in that extreme range of motion. When you open up an available range of motion, if you don't load that, if you don't make a forceful contraction within that open range of motion, it tends to close right back down. So the loading is just the weight of her leg. But I am asking her body to open up these adductors and glute muscles, but then accept the weight of her leg to do contractions in that end range position. And that's going to help maintain the range of motion that we're opening up. It's going to stay open for longer. Then we go into a half kneeling adductor stretch, bent knee broken frog. This is more specific to the groin connection of the adductor rather than the adductor down by the knee. And then we have half kneeling broken frog good morning, and that is the hinging mechanics while trying to keep the lumbar spine neutral. And that's exactly the type of hinging that she's going to need to do for her squat. She needs to be able to bend at the hip but not lose neutrality in her lumbar spine. So she goes 2 rounds through all those things. Then we have a circuit with what's called a cat-cow, a narrow cat-cow with a extra thoracic stretch. And this is going to help open up any tightness she might have in her lower traps, rhomboids, and mid traps. And what this is important is if those muscles are chronically, if they're kind of bound down and tight, her external rotation in her shoulders isn't going to be very good, and her upper back is going to feel stiff. So we want to open that up and kind of stretch. It's like when you wake up in the morning in bed and you kind of stretch your arms out to the side. You're just kind of opening things up, and that's going to feel more refreshing. Then she's going to do a child pose with a thoracic rotation with her hand on her head. This is to start to get basically external rotation and mid-back contractions. So we know that cat-cow opens up the range of motion for the rhomboids, lower traps, and mid-traps. And then this movement, the child's pose, thoracic rotation, hand on head, creates a contraction within those muscles. But it also does it in a unilateral variation. So that way, if we have any asymmetries in thoracic strength, this would help address that over time. And again, it fits that mold of we want to open up range of motion, but then we want to use that range of motion to maintain that range of motion. So again, if you're going to increase range of motion, you have to then load that and in order for it to stay. Then we have YTWs on the floor. Again, just a lot of external rotation, a lot of shoulder health, and this is going to get her shoulders in a better position and everything loose and warmed up and ready for a back squat. So get her hands externally rotated to have the back on her, the bar on her back. Then we have a circuit of dumbbell one-arm rows in a split stance into a dumbbell single leg RDL. And then a quad stretch with just her, it's like basically a standing couch stretch. The one-arm dumbbell rows in the split stance forces, the positioning forces a little bit of a stretch in the adductor again, but in a loaded way. And it forces her to open up her hip flexors, which is going to help us have less chronic tightness and better hip positioning when we do the squats. And then a dumbbell single leg RDL, a core activation, glute activation, works on balancing components, works on unilateral asymmetries if there's any strength differences. And these also start to produce adrenaline and endorphins because they're loaded and they're going to be more intense. Adrenaline is focus and aggression, endorphins is natural painkillers. So this starts to get her kind of chemical balance in her body ready for her to be aggressive in her squats. The couch stretch, the standing quad stretch on the roller, that's going to help open up the hip flexor, open up the upper quads, especially that middle quad muscle, which connects down through the patella tendon. So if somebody has patella tendon pain or kneecap pain, this could be a huge reason why. So you want to do a standing couch stretch in order to open that up. Then our squats, we're going to do just competition style because we're about, I think, 3 to 7 weeks away is this program, I believe, from her next competition. So we want to be doing a competition style so we can be dialing in that technique. Now, what I'm doing here is I have a note for her. I said, please, during this month cycle, don't go heavier than the prescribed weight so we can peak your CNS and the hamstring connectors properly going into the final 3 weeks of meet prep. What happens, and this is not Lauren alone, is usually about 4 to 6 weeks before a meet, I want the person to feel good. I want them to feel great. I want them to feel as though they could lift 1,000,000 pounds because I want their CNS to feel refreshed and ready and excited for the meet. We don't want to go into the meet fatigued and tired. We want to go into the meet like we're bouncing off the walls, ready to do something crazy and fun. Like you've been holding them back and holding them back and holding them back, and then you're like, okay, go. What happens is as they start to feel good, they tend to do a bunch of crazy shit in training, and they'll like do brand new maxes and all this crazy stuff. And it's because they feel good. They're also nervous. Am I going to be able to do this at the meet? Maybe I'll test and see if I can do it now. That way I'll know if I can do it at the meet. The problem is if you do it now, you won't be able to do it at the meet because you just jacked your CNS up. You royally fatigued all the muscles. We have micro stress within all the connective tissues. There's all these down regulators for power output that happens when you overexert the body too close to a meet where you can't recover it before the meet. So I put that note in there and also messaged her on Instagram Messenger because that's where we communicate back and forth, and just said, hey, if you can, I know you're going to be able to do more than these, but please don't. And she knows by now, so she was fine with that. But I gave her the weights to do for warm-ups, and then I gave her top end weights, and then what we're also doing is 10-second walkout holds to get her CNS ready to big, heavy weights. So I'm having her do, at the end of all of her squat sets when she's fatigued and tired, we're doing 10-second walkouts with progressively closer to her max, then we're eventually going to be going over her max, just for her to pick that up, have the nervous system go, holy shit, that's really heavy. But that way she gets through that now, rather than picking it up at the meet and going, holy shit, that's really heavy. So now she'll pick it up and go, oh, yeah, that's about as heavy as it was last time. And then it's not a shock, and she can just kind of focus on doing what she does, right? So we want to get the CNS ready to feel big, heavy weights. And doing a walkout hold is a way to do that without having to actually squat the weight. Now, after that, she goes into a circuit of accessories. She has 45-degree hyperextensions, then GHD reverse glute raises, and dumbbell walking lunges with a quad focus. So this is where I'm blending her quads and like her posterior anterior chain, so front side, back side of the body. I'm blending that, but 2 of the 3 is posterior. So squats for her is a quad dominant movement. So it's already, say, 70-30 quads. So now I'm making this accessory circuit the inverse of that. And this is going to balance out her squat training to make sure all the muscles, all the kinks, all the links in the chain, they're all strong and healthy. This is also going to get us that extra little bit of focus that we need to build up the posterior chain for deadlifts. So 45-degree hyperextensions she's doing with weights, and that's going to be heavy sets of 5 to 10 reps. That is strength, and that is muscle building. Then we have GHD reverse glute raises. That's body weight only for sets of 10 reps. That is actually more so muscle building and blood flow. It's also going to force core stabilization. She's going to have to maintain neutrality in her core. So it's actually a little bit of a core element, or at least a hip tilt control element, which we do need for squat and deadlift positional control. So that's a strength-based element for the core. And then we have dumbbell walking lunges with a quad focus, and that's just to give the unilateral work for quads, but there's still a ton of adductors, ton of glutes, ton of core balance in there as well. So that is going to be her Monday workout. We have the movement prep circuits, then we have that little bit of a weighted circuit before she does her squats, and then that accessory circuit. Then Tuesday is bench press. We're starting with cable, half kneeling, 1 arm rows, and we have 2 variations. So she's going to be kneeling, like so on one knee, she's on one knee, and then she's doing a cable row, but she's going to be doing a 1 arm row. The first variation, she's going to allow the cable to actually rotate her torso to where she's reaching towards the cable as far as she can. And then she's going to pull that cable back to a neutral position to where her shoulders are squared up with her hips. And she's going to repeat that on each side. So this is a full extension to a neutral rotation contraction. Then she's doing from a neutral extension to a full rotation contraction. This is an enormous amount of core work. This is an enormous amount of cross work between the hips. And it helps work our lats, which is going to help us improve our deadlift as well. So tons and tons of built-in core and rotational work, hip stability work, and lat work into those warm-ups. They're not actually warm-ups, they're working sets. Then we have a dead hang to help open up and stretch the lats. She's very muscular, so her lats can get very tight, especially after squatting with all the squat work, then the 45-degree hyper. She's going to be pinching the lats to hold position there. She's also going to be pinching the lats during the walking lunges. So we want to come into this bench day and open up those lats. So we do the heavy aggressive work for the lats first, then we do a dead hang, and she's pairing that with hand release push-ups, which is just to get some blood flow and force some thoracic opening and opening up her chest muscles and getting blood flow into the shoulders. We want to basically loosen the lats and get her shoulders into neutral alignment, with neutral rotational alignment within the socket. So the hand release push-ups with your arm out technique, it's kind of like a military style push-up. That's going to help us do that. So she has a dead hang for 30 seconds, then sets at 20 reps on the push-ups. For her, 20 reps is not going to kill her strength. If it did, that would be a bummer. That would be sad. Now for you, if it does, great. Do them more often until they don't. Then we have bench press. We're doing a long pause at the bottom, which is basically competition style. And we're doing a couple heavy sets at top end, some 3 sets of 2, 2 sets of 1, 1 set of 1, that kind of stuff. And then, again, the heavy lockout holds. I actually forgot to type lockout instead of walkout. Sorry, Lord. But we're doing heavy lockout holds. And it's the same idea where we're loading near maximal weights, but I don't want her to actually bench it, even though she probably can. Just getting the CNS ready to hold that weight and not freak out. Then she has a circuit of body weight dips, dumbbell chest flies, and then pull-ups. Now, the body weight dips, we had a fun little thing here, is they're written as body weight dips, 3 sets of good form failure. She decided to add a 25-pound plate and do sets of 10 or less. And I was like, damn it. So the reason why is I wanted it to be high volume, high blood flow, because it'll create more of an opening within the tissues. So if we've just did a bunch of heavy benching, her tissues are going to be tight and cranked down. I don't want us to stay that way between now and the next workout. So high rep work really flushes a ton of fluid in and out of the muscles, and it can leave you feeling a better range of motion availability after those sets than if you do them very heavy, you're just chronically tightening everything right back down. And that's when people can lead into elbow pain, shoulder pain, wrist pain, bad mechanics because everything's so tight. So I would prefer that she would stay higher reps and get the blood flow there, especially since the next movement was dumbbell chest flies, where she can go as crazy and heavy as she wants. So I wanted a contrast there between high reps and heavy weight. The heavy weight helps build the muscle, but the high rep helps open it back up. And then we have weighted pull-ups, and that's just to help continue to strengthen the lats. And especially now that we've already opened them up with the dead hang, she should get a mad pump on that. So that should have been very good. That would have been a good circuit. That's Tuesday. So that's our bench day. So again, we have those rotational movements, half-kneeling rotational movements to challenge the core, the cross balance in the hip and postural control, and then also strengthen the lats. We have the dead hang to open the lats, plus the push-ups to open up the shoulders, our bench work, and then the high rep dips to flush all those fluids through the tissues, and then the heavy chest flies to build the chest. And like I said, we'll swing back and forth between chest focus and tricep focus sometimes, and then pull-ups. Okay. Next, we have our Thursday workout, which is lower body mobility and deadlifts. So here, again, we're following a similar structure is we do mobility, movement prep. We do mobility work at the start to workout. So she does half kneeling, posterior pelvic tilt, hip flexor, quad stretch. And this is to help open up the adductor. Well, she's going to feel mostly in her hip flexors. So she's going to feel mostly in her hip flexors. And this is so that way when we go to contract our glutes at the top of a conventional deadlift, she's going to contract her glutes almost to where she's creating a posterior tilt. That's going to require that the hip flexor is available to full stretch. If not, she has an anterior tilt and she's never going to get a full lockout with her hips. So this variation of stretch will specifically improve our ability to quote-unquote tuck our butt, tuck our hips at the top of the conventional deadlift. Then she has a lunge stretch, which actually reinforces that and helps open up a bunch of other muscles. It's a variation of a couch stretch to help open up the quads. Then she had Spider-Man lunge to elbow to instep. That's everything in the lower body. Good God. I mean, adductors, hamstrings, quads, you name it, it's all there. And then Spider-Man lunge with reach is to help activate the core bracing, and thoracic and shoulder health. So all that's built into that first circuit. Then we have a circuit of leaning over Cossack squats, then body weight Cossack squats. Those are just activation, weighted movement in that extreme range of motion. Again, if you're going to open a range of motion, you have to weight the range of motion to keep the range of motion. And then we have trap bar farmer's carries. And this is to get her CNS up, and again, get the endorphins, adrenaline up, get her body chemistry right and ready, get her excitability ready for the deadlifts. And then we have depth jumps into vertical jumps, and again, same thing, explosiveness, excitability, get the body primed and ready, so that way when she goes to deadlift, she already feels explosive and fiery and ready to go. The deadlifts, again, same note, is do not do more than I wrote, which she did a great job. We're just basically working up to some heavy singles in this program, that's it. And then her circuit is a GHD dumbbell row, and then barbell RDLs from the rack. This is a mean combination. I am a jackass for this one, so sorry, Lauren, but you'll thank me when our deadlift is enormous. So GHD dumbbell rows is, imagine getting into a GHD like you're going to do back raises, but stay perfectly horizontal and do dumbbell rows. So it's like you're doing a seal row, but you have no chest support. So your support has to come from your hamstrings, your glutes, and your abs, along with your lumbar spine. This is absolutely mean. Absolutely mean. This is an amazing exercise to build your deadlift. If you've never done it, try it, cuss me out, send me a message on social media, tell me to go screw myself, and then try it some more. Okay? So GHD dumbbell rows. Look it up on YouTube. And then we have barbell RDLs, and that's just going to destroy everything more so, but in a contraction way. So the GHD dumbbell row is actually an isometric strengthening movement for the hamstrings, glutes, and core. It's a contract-release movement, strengthening movement for the lats, and especially like rhomboids, traps, all the good stuff in the upper back. But it's an isometric contraction strength. Then, when you go to the barbell RDLs, you're now doing a contract-release type of strength development. So we're challenging the muscles in two completely different modes of challenge. One is, can they be strong and not allow movement, such as holding our best position in squat and deadlift? The other is, can they be strong creating movement, which would be when we contract to drive the weight in a direction. So some muscles, when we do heavy movements, are bracers, supporting muscles, and some muscles are movers. They do the work. When you do a circuit like this, where you pair an isometric movement with a contract-release type movement, you're essentially training everything to be a stabilizer and everything to be a mover, and then if and when each needs to do each, they'll be ready to go. So it makes you bulletproof. So that is her accessory circuit on deadlift day. Our last workout is bench press. That's on Friday. Again, we do movement preparation. We have floor slides for thoracic mobility, psoas sit-ups, which is a fun, weird way of doing sit-ups that challenges your psoas muscles. And that's for, again, controlling hip tilt positioning and stabilization of bracing. And then she has a glute bridge, where we alternate glute bridges and reverse crunches. And that's for core strength, glute strength. So a lot of good stuff built in there. And then our next circuit is side planks. We do hip dips, then a side plank with an elbow. It's basically an elbow to knee type movement. And then what's called an elbow kick. So basically we do side planks with various movements. And that forces her to stabilize her core and then move limbs around, which is exactly what we have to do in squat, bench, and deadlift. And then the next circuit is a bunch of banded work. So we do banded dislocations for the opening up the shoulder health. We do overhead pull aparts and overhead overhead presses, kind of with bands. And what this does is it challenges her thoracic muscles and the muscles that control shoulder positioning. So everything in the upper back, everything that's engaged within the shoulders to maintain proper positioning in bench and squats is being challenged as a mover and a bracer in that circuit. And then she pairs with that dumbbell decline chest flies. Because again, this is our chest-focused program, so we're doing a little bit of chest pre-fatigue, pre-isolation work before we do our barbell bench variation for the day, which is a wide grip variation with a pause. The wide grip variation is to target, again, more chest than a standard grip. So when your hands are wider, you get more chest, specifically the chest connection out at the armpit. And I pre-fatigued that because I was a jerk face. And I pre-fatigued that with the dumbbell decline chest flies. So what happens is she doesn't need to go as heavy with the bench press work. She won't even be able to because she pre-fatigued the muscles. But that, again, conserves our CNS, considering you already hit her CNS with heavy singles and doubles on squats, heavy singles and doubles on bench, and heavy singles on deadlift. We don't need a fourth time destroying the CNS. We really want the CNS to actually start to recover. We want to create like mini cycles of CNS recover across these weeks. So if I can drop off the CNS stress on Friday, I actually get a little bit of a CNS stress recovery on Friday, more on Saturday, more on Sunday, then on Monday she's more fresh. So I'm giving more of a CNS stress recovery cycle variance throughout the week. And then across 4 weeks, it's going to allow her to keep up with the CNS recovery as we increase the top loads going into the powerlifting meet. And then the circuit for this is explosive push-ups, then sled throws from a squat position, and then we're doing TRX underhand inverted rows. So that is explosive, aggressive pushing movements, but no heavy eccentric loading. So again, working on explosivity, working on contractile strength, but we're not accepting as much connective tissue stress and muscle tissue stress because there's no loaded eccentrics. And then the inverted rows, the underhand grip is just really good work for posture, and again, continuing to strengthen and improve our shoulder health. So that is the rotation and program that she went through for these past 4 weeks. We then have 3 weeks going into the next meet. In these next 3 weeks, we're going to drop the volume and intensity, especially the eccentric loading of our accessories. We're mostly just going to focus on movement quality, movement prep, warm-ups, get our adrenaline endorphins up, hit our big heavy lifts, and leave the gym. That's kind of the idea. So can we lift heavy things? Can we feel good and confident with them with the right technique? That's really what we're doing over the next 3 weeks, letting the body heal and recover. So Lauren, hopefully that was fun to hear the rundown of that, and hopefully it was enjoyable for everybody else as well. Again, if you'd like a copy of that program, totally for free, just shoot me a message at email at brutalirongym@gmail.com or our website, www.brutalirongym.com. And if you're interested in one-on-one coaching like this service, where I write everything incredibly, insanely personalized, just like this program is for you, and I do your nutrition, and I do video reviews, nutrition reviews, and we talk every single week. Let me know. Our one-on-one service is $200 a month right now. That's it. It's actually very cheap for how much communication I give. Just ask people like Lauren, and they'll tell you the same. But I really want to help people. I love doing this job. It's what I do all day, every day, and I am working on creating more openings to be able to work with more people. So I've worked on my life structure, and I have an opening right now to accept some more clients. So that's why I'm mentioning it more in recent podcasts. So if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, just shoot me a message again, email, or at our website, www.brutalirongym.com. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people you share it with, the more people can help. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast. You can do a donation on our website, or you can buy your supplements from Nutricost.com. Use the code BrutalIron10 for a 10% discount, and we get a 10% commission on anything you spend. So thank you for doing that. And then if you like the information we share in this podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.